Recording is in progress. So today we'll have a little bit of a recap, go over what we've covered so far. The collection focus is our social history collections. So today it's a bit of a hint here, but we'll be looking at some items that are currently on display. The Street of Shops exhibition, which is the exhibition in which they are on display. So we'll have a bit of a look at C.F. Falk. So he was a watchmaker and jeweler in Beechworth. And he's very renowned these days. And then we'll look at the catalogue focus of loans, exhibitions, condition, and conservation. So a recap, this is going to be a really big sort of overview, but as you hopefully remember, we're looking at historic photographs. So there's the daguerreotypes, the stereoscopic photographs, the postcards, the carte de vista, and negatives. And when it comes to the catalogue focuses, last time we were looking at the relationships, so that's parent and child records, the references, so making sure you are noting where you're sourcing information to build the catalogue, the context, so why we care about the item and why we preserve it the way that we do, and acquisitions, so, provenance as well, so what's the life story of the items in our collection, and the acquisition, how did it come to be part of our collection? So social history collections, so this is pretty high level, but social history collections preserve and interpret items that reflect the daily lives, experiences, and cultural practices of people throughout history. So it's a very broad topic, which means that there's lots of specific sub-collections within pretty well all social history collections. So when it comes to the area around the Burke Museum, some very key aspects are the mining history. So that's everything from the equipment used to mine for gold, as well as items that people used in daily life during that time period. So not necessarily directly associated with mining. It might be a hair clip, it might be a watch. It's a really broad topic, but personally, it's my favorite because I think the broadness, but also the fact that you can really start to reflect on people's lives and sort of the ordinary, but the people's lives that were just doing day-to-day things, not necessarily something that's been marked down as grand and iconic, but also just what happens when people live their lives through the days. And I find that quite beautiful. So I've picked a picture that I thought looks a little bit social, a little bit like, Mum, why did you bring me here? This is from the Burke Museum collection. So Lake Sambell is one of two lakes that are in the Beechworth area. Lake Sambell is my favorite because it's where you do dragon boat training, and I'm part of the team. So it very much weights that way, but it's also a beautiful, beautiful lake that you can do a full walk around. And if you're a bird watcher, it's absolutely ideal. So if you're ever up here, I would recommend it. So the Street of Shops exhibition, it's a pretty unique exhibition anywhere across Australia or across the world, but it's from 1979. So it was created by Roy Harvey. At the time, he's quite a renowned figure in Beechworth history, but at the time he was the Burke Museum curator. So he did the dreaming, the designing, as well as he was also on the tools when it came to building what's in the background here, this streetscape. So it reimagines the 1880s in Beechworth. So it's really showing we have two main streets that are still the center of the Beechworth community when it comes to businesses and the like. That's Ford Street and Camp Street. So this is very reminiscent, and if you have a walk down either of those streets today, you will see some of these names. Say James Ingram, you can still see his name on top of the current newsagents that is in that spot. So the design simulates a street of shops. So they're mock shops, and they feature objects that we've collected from the local community over the entire span of the Burke Museum. So since the 1860s, we've been acquiring items from the local community. And so it really is a mixture of those items on display. I will say it isn't it isn't designed so that the objects were necessarily manufactured by that shop. So say we're going to be looking in the watchmaker and jewelers shop today, and that has items that are part of the theme and the feel and that type of work, but not necessarily produced by Falk himself. So as well as inside these mock shops, we also have large objects on display. So we have things like bicycles, a wooden water pipe, and a large cast iron. Sorry, I've just said large cast iron objects. A lot of these items, it's been a little bit strategic, I guess, from the back end, because they're also items that are hard to store. We have finite storage. And so we also have a think about how we can use this streetscape so that people can enjoy the items, but we also have a place that that isn't taking up a spot in the collection store. So we're always trying to be a little bit strategic there. And this is another picture. So this is the side street. So it's in an L shape. And I just thought this was a very nice way to showcase some of these items. So this is a really good snapshot of museology of the 70s to 80s. There was a real popularity in immersive experiences. So the sort of Sovereign Hill-esque, if you're aware of Sovereign Hill in Victoria, so in Ballarat, where there's people dressed up in period costumes and things. So this is a similar feel, except without people playing parts. So we also have an audio track that I will say scares the bejesus out of me if it's left on after the museum is closed, but it has the sounds of a street. So occasionally you'll hear children, playing and laughing, and carriages moving, and it really means that you can walk through, and it, I think, triggers another part of your imagination there. But it's very special. It's something that we're always working on updating and improving without changing too much, because it's also very beloved by the community. And hopefully from these you can see why. So Charles Frederick, CF Falk, he's like I said, a renowned watchmaker and jeweler. He was also a gold buyer, quite a good one. And he moved, so he was born in Prussia, in Kurland, Prussia in 1833, and he emigrated in 1854. So he started in Adelaide and then came across to the goldfields in Victoria. So El Dorado, which is a place not too far, I think it'd be about a 15-minute drive from Beechworth, is where he started his search for gold. He was quite successful and decided to start a business in Beechworth. So in 1862, he started the watchmaker and jeweler business, and he kept going until his death. So he passed away in 1908, and the shop went to his son, Lewis. So that continued on from there. So at this point, I guess I'll keep talking about Falk for a minute. So because he's quite significant, when items come up of Falk's, we're very interested as the Burke Museum. So we don't have a large budget for things like acquisitions and purchases, but we do always keep an eye out for items that might be quite special and quite specific because of his consistent I guess, contributions at the time, as well as the legacy. A lot of people see a lot of value in the clocks, the watches, and the jewelry that he made because of the high level and the in-depth expertise that he had in making it. So we'll jump now into the catalogue focuses. So for today, we're looking at loans, exhibition, condition, and conservation. I will say this week, you'll see in your records, you won't necessarily have to add information to these fields, but I'll run you through them. And I think the jump to the social history will give you another, I guess, another good run at everything we've learnt so far. So you'll also be doing the context, the provenance, a good amount of research. So I didn't want to overload you and thought having a glance at these would be a good way to get familiar, even if you don't use them. The one that you will be updating, of course, is exhibitions because they're currently on display. So looking at loans, Loans are the temporary exchange of objects or artifacts between institutions for a designed period and purpose, often for exhibitions, research, or educational programs. So this is very common in institutions, as you very likely are already aware. So there's outward loans and inward loans. This is important to know for cataloguing because you don't want to do the reverse one or else your provenance might get confused. But an outward loan, so that's when an item is going from your collection to another party. And an inward loan is when things are coming in. It sounds simple, but when you've got a lot going on, sometimes it's good to just double check that you've got that the right way around. So mainly our loans are for exhibition. So inward loans are primarily items that are on display. It's very rare that we have items for research unless it is, say, for a large research project. Most likely it'll be a large institution. So whether there's something going on at the Melbourne Museum or a national museum. But in saying that, that's very few and far between as well. So exhibitions are pretty clear cut, hopefully. So an exhibition is a curated display of objects, artifacts, and works of art organized to convey a specific theme, story, or educational message to the public. So it's items that are viewable within your institution. And this part of the catalogue is, for one, a good location tracking device, as well as making sure that you're capturing all of the information that has been researched and has been communicated for that time period, because that's really valuable going forward. And it's a good way to contain that information in a specific area. So then we'll look at condition. So this is the physical state. So what it looks like, whether it's degrading, whether there's impacts from time, any damage. So it's really looking at anything you can see. And this is absolutely essential when it comes to items that have been damaged, and making sure that you're tracking that story and you're not responding to something that has already been responded to in previous times because you haven't marked it down that the damage occurred before you'd noticed it in that instance. So making sure it's building your provenance as well, making sure that the life story is complete or as complete as possible. And then there's conservation. So conservation, this is really referring to professional, so expert treatment for an object. It isn't necessarily interventive, as in it doesn't mean the object has to be touched or it has to be repaired, for example, by a materials conservator, but it does have to be an expert who has either assessed, so looking at things like the condition, looking at the risks involved with either storing or transferring or handling an item. And this documents all of that work, once again, for the provenance, as well as to make sure that we understand the things that we can't necessarily see in an object as well. So say if a materials conservator has come along and re-adhered two parts of an item back together, and we don't know that there's adhesive in there, and we don't know that the adhesive will come undone when, for example, when water is applied, then things can go horribly wrong very quickly. So this is a really good way to make sure we're capturing all of that information when treatments occur or when assessments occur. And I'll jump back again. So at this point, I'll take you through Victorian collections. So looking back, we'll start at loans. I'll just jump out of here and get the right one up. So this is a bit of an example object. So I'll show him to you. Can everyone see? Oh, and of course it's loading slowly, but can everyone see our little Sir Walter Scott? Yeah, so this is one of my favorite items in the collection. This is a bust, so it's a Parian bust of Sir Walter Scott. So Parian ware is a type of porcelain. It's very fine grained, it's very beautiful, and it's very much desired for its similarity to marble. So this item, along with many others, is a replica of a marble bust of Sir Walter Scott that's a little bit smaller, and it was commissioned by the Crystal Palace Art Union in association with Copland Pottery. So the Art Union was an attempt to sort of democratize art consumption, and it was aimed at making art more accessible to people who weren't the uber rich. So you could subscribe, and then each year there'd be a ballot, and you could get something. Say if you were a 1 guinea subscriber, which the Burke Museum was, then you could pick a little bust of Sir Walter Scott and have that. And that was for individuals as well as organisations. So it was quite a fantastic initiative. It was an initiative around the 1860s to the turn of the century, was I guess its most popular time. But I love him because, for one, I'm very interested in ceramics, as well as I just think that this bust has an unbelievable amount of personality when you get close to his face. And I think that there's elements that are quite beautiful, like the fact that he's wearing tartan as part of his robe, and he is Scottish, so I think that's quite a nice homage that they've incorporated. But going through what we're actually doing, I'll give you a bit of a glance. So we'll run through where we're up to. So the identifier, this has all come from the worksheet, the catalogue worksheet. So I've put in the identifier that was on the sheet, as well as it's a sculpture. And I've done that as a repeat for these two. And this actually did have a title. So the reason that I put this here is not because I've looked at it and seen it as a bust, but because it was actually told to me by information that I've sourced. So then we'll go through, and of course, these are the photographs. I'll skip over this one for now. And I'll jump to description. So once again, this is just a bit of a glance. So excuse the speed that I'm running through these, but we've got a little bit of a description, making sure the inscriptions and the markings are all there. And once again, just a forward dash to separate everything. It doesn't need to be on a different line. It can just be separated by these forward slashes. So the English, the language I've put as English because the writing is in English, and the materials I've just gone through. I've added a few options because there's been a few names through history of the material that was used. So it can be found as Parian, which is the most prolific these days, but it can be Parian ceramic, it can be Parian ware, and originally there was also the name statuary porcelain. And there was a little bit of a contested moment in who was the inventor, because there were quite a few types of porcelain that were being developed at the time. So I put all of them in, hoping that it'll help the search function. And then I put in the dimensions, and we don't know the weight. I'm hoping to get some small scales so we can start, as we digitize, weighing things, of course, not photographs, but things a little bit heavier than that. So he currently doesn't have any parent record or any related records, but as we go through and digitize more of the Parian items in our collection, I will be connecting them as related records because they are all linked through their provenance and through the way that we acquired them, which was through the Crystal Palace Art Union subscription. So in here, haven't added my references, but I will tell you most of the references are from Trove. So they're from newspaper articles of the time, because that was how the Crystal Palace Art Union announced what were the options for that round. So the context, so in here, a bit of a snapshot, so making sure that I've added the original sculptor. So he did the design, and that was the marble depiction, making sure I've actually said who is depicted, and once again, why we care. So who he was as a person, making sure it's hitting the dates, as well as a bit of, so for this one, there's significance and context from the depiction of Sir Walter Scott, from the artist who created the initial sculpture, as well as the material type, and that link to the Crystal Palace Art Union. So this one, that's why there's a few different lines. They won't all be like that, but social history collection items tend to have more diversity when it comes to those significances. just due to the nature of the items, the fact that they were manufactured. They might be beautiful or significant in their design, as well as the uses on a personal level. So please touch base if you have any questions for this week's records. So then I've popped in some subjects. And once again, I've put in Parian as well as the statutory porcelain. One thing that I will likely add after having a glance, as well as changing that porcelain P to a capital, is adding in Parian ware as an option. So the significance, very straightforward. And these ones are the drop down. So I've added a few different options because I think it meets certain criteria for each of those. So the social or spiritual, the link that I have there is that the social side, the community organisation that was involved in the acquisition and the subscription to the Crystal Palace Art Union. So it isn't necessarily related to the spiritual side. So provenance, jotted down that it was 1871. Manufactured, so it's Copland, that's the pottery creator, and I've put in some other details. So the Crystal Palace Art Union to make sure that that's embedded into the catalogue details. So the acquisition, this is, I got this from the base, so from the inscription itself, is that we know that James Cunningham donated as part of the Crystal Palace Art Union subscription. So this is where it starts getting a little bit sticky, but because we have a certain person's name, I put that here. And we know that James Cunningham was quite a prominent man in town when the Athenaeum was transitioning to the museum. And so he was part of that board. So that's where it gets a little bit, yeah, I guess sticky, and you have to make sure that you've got the right person and not someone who's similar to them, and that they do have that link to the organisation, in this case, the museum. So we don't have any other information. Of course, he doesn't have an email and the like, but I've put in all the information that we have. So going down to loans. So no loan records here, but I'll show you what it looks like if we were to add any loan details, if my internet will allow it. So it works much the same as some of the fields that you've already encountered, but you click add loan. So a lot of these are drop downs. There's options here. So these will be the most likely types, but when you do other, definitely make sure there's a note that says what that other is. So say if it was for exhibition, this is where it's really good to remember outward loans are going out, inward loans are coming into you. So put yourself at the center when thinking about it. And these dates, I will say, sometimes they're a little bit question mark, but most of the time they're going to be quite clear cut. So this will be part of the agreement that you have with another party. So the other party, there will be contractual obligations. You'll have paperwork, and there's often requirements about how items will be, how they'll be stored, what the environment is like, the details, basically anything that that could happen or you expect to happen in the life of that object while on loan. And it's good to put all of that in the loan notes that sit outside, I guess, as the direct main information that will be useful when cataloging. And I would always put in a little note or reference to where the legal contract and that documentation lives. So in our case, we have a information management system that generates a code for each file. So I would be putting that code in, as well as the container in which it lives. Everything is coded in our system. So just making sure, once again, it's making it easier for the next person who has a look, making it easier to find that additional information. So contact person, this is very important. You should have this information if it's a loan that you're doing that is current. It's much harder when it's legacy items. There's long-term loans, so sometimes something will be on loan for multiple decades. When this happens, it gets harder and harder, especially if it's an individual or a smaller stakeholder party, not something like a museum. But I will say, regardless of the organisation, it does just entropy creeps into to this as well, and it starts getting harder and harder. So locking this in as soon as you know the details, I would recommend every time because it's amazing how quickly this information starts to move around. So I'd be putting in everything that you have. With current ones, you should be able to ask for details. I would say the email, the phone number, those contact details are much more important than someone's address because, of course, we use them much more regularly than we do send someone a letter in the post, especially about a loan. So once you're done with this and all of the information is in there, then you can just move on and it'll auto save. You'll be seeing the save icon, which hopefully you've seen already. It tells you when it's saving and then when something is saved or when a catalogue record is saved. But if you would like to add an additional loan, it works the same as many, where you can just keep adding them. So there's no cap on how many loans you can document in this section. So exhibition. So this was an exhibition that was only in May. Wow, it feels like it was years ago, but it was spotlighting different items over a 5-week period. And for one of those weeks, I selected Sir Walter Scott. So I've put the name of it. So it was Festival Freaky Fridays at the Burke Museum. And this was the information that was on the label, as well as a little bit of additional information that could be obtained online. So I've copied and pasted it and dropped it here so that we don't have to look anywhere additional and we don't have to risk losing that information once the label comes down. So I'll show you if we're adding one. So say for this exhibition for the Street of Shops, I will say for the Street of Shops, it's a little bit tricky with the information that we have to go on. We've had some gaps in staff that has meant that there's gaps in the consistency of collections information over time. So this is a legacy problem that Victorian Collections is helping piece back together. But it does mean that there might be a question mark over when your item initially went on display. So in that case, I would just be leaving it blank. And if you know the year, or you know the year and the month, but not the day, I'll just remind you the general standard is to start with the start. So 01. So if you only know the year, it would be 0101. And then say if you knew it was 2007, it would be like that. If you knew that it was in May of 2007, then it's just for whatever information, whatever numbers aren't known. So it would be 0105, of course, for me, and then 2007. So if you're not sure at all, you couldn't even get it down to the year, leave that blank. The end date, we don't have an end date. So once again, I'd be inclined to leave it blank. The title is The Street of Shops, but I would also be putting CFL, watchmaker and jeweler, and separated with a comma. So for this one as well, the reason that I've got an ampersand instead of writing out and, because I know in the past I've said it's good to write things in full, is because that is how it is written. That is the official name of the shop. It's how it was written on the shop and how it has been documented over time. So always prioritizing the correct to the object and to its story over things like extending an ampersand out into A and D. So this is fine for the title. The location, I will just tell you this, and I'll add this to our Trello card as well. The location is this. So this is a legacy location that I'm keeping with because it is on a lot of things. But to read it, it's saying 05. It was selected as the location code for the Street of Shops at one point. So when you go into the museum and you start in the main hall, you start at 01. So there was a few that no longer exist. So we've got some gaps there, but 05 is still the Street of Shops. And then someone's come through and they've started counting. They've pointed at the folk shop and said 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's how we have them numbered. So for your items, that is where they will live. And then the description is the description of the shop would be fine. So you could just say, oh, sorry, type correctly and sure, you know, maybe the dates, but just a brief description. So that would be fine. And this is really the use of this description, because we have descriptions all through this catalogue. This description is to make it easier for someone if they're having a look in the exhibition space and they want a little snapshot of just that display that they're looking at. And in this case, it is just the folk shop. So just a real snapshot. I wouldn't overthink this one too much. So once we're done, works the same as loans. It will save, and you can just keep adding. So if you know that there's been some historic exhibitions, and for this one, depending on how keen you're feeling, don't feel the pressure if you are feeling under pressure. But if you would like to give any research a go, I would recommend, if you'd like to see if your item has been on display somewhere else, so you have an inkling that it might have, having a look in places like Trove or PROV, the Public Records of Victoria website, to see if there's any primary sources. So see if there's anything that was advertised from a time that the exhibition may have occurred, and see if you can get any hits that way. I would usually do keyword searches that are specific to your object. So if it has any inscriptions on it, or you know the maker, or any of that provenance detail that might give you some hits. But once again, it's unlikely that you'll find a hit that way, but it is good practice to give it a go if you do have the capacity. So then we go to condition reports. So a lot of the items that you'll see in the worksheets will have a condition noted. I would be adding these in. So hopefully we'll get lucky enough that it actually says the cataloger's name on that worksheet, because then it's also telling you the process was to do the condition report at the same time. So it's telling you who it was that conducted that condition report. And in an ideal world, it will also tell you the year in which that happened. So these are, if you do have them, insert them in, but of course you can't do a physical condition analysis off-site. So don't feel like you have to make it up based on the photographs. But if there is something that's very obvious, you could note it in the comments, but I wouldn't be giving it a status when it comes to the condition status here. So this is a drop-down list. So excellent, good, fair, poor, and unspecified. I will say I don't use unspecified. I would rather just leave it fully blank. But excellent, good, fair, and poor is a really good snapshot, but it needs to be with some comments in almost all cases, unless you're doing a very widespread collection survey where you just want to get a snapshot of the overall condition, how you're going with your collection. If it's any more specific than that, I would very much encourage you to put in details in the comments, because good is so subjective that one person can look at something and say, oh, it's in poor condition, and another person can say, oh, no, well, because I've experienced items of this material of this time that have been much more heavily degraded and have been able to be stabilized, I think this is quite good. So because of that subjectivity, I'd be marking these down, and these, as hopefully you'll see on your catalogue worksheets, are very straight to the point, not fleshed out as full sentences necessarily, but things like scuff marks, hairline fractures on vertical angle at front. So just making sure that you're just giving the information without too much buffer language, I guess. So for this one, this is where, if it's on your catalogue worksheet, feel free to put down the name of the cataloger. But in a lot of cases, that information might not be there as well. So if not, that's perfectly fine. It goes the same as the logic for other fields where you put in the information you have, and if you don't feel like you have confirmation on that information, just leave it out. I popped in my email because I thought it was a good idea and made sure that it's clear that I'm here in Beechworth. I didn't put in my phone number because my phone doesn't work at the moment, and I'm pretty suspicious about if it ever will. So I'm apparently somewhere in council, they will source me a phone. But for now, email it is. So then we'll jump down to conservation, and I'll just give you a rundown of this as well. So just to reiterate, this is when an expert is treating. So it's not something that you would be doing in-house in the museum. It's something where you will be sourcing an expert and then producing official reports. And it will come with official paperwork as well. So in the same way that the loans detail, it's good to put a note about where to find the additional information that's not here in the catalogue. I'd be doing the same for this as well. So drop-down list makes it a little bit easy, but whether it's proposed, whether it's approved, in progress, or completed, so just making sure we know where it is in time and what it isn't. So making sure that we don't think that an object has been worked on by a conservator when it's just been proposed and there's no money or planning backing it. So the priority, high would be, say, if you've got a Sir Walter Scott bust and it's dropped on the floor and it's shattered into a few pieces, that would be a very high priority. That it needs to go back together, or there's a risk that that object, for one, might never go back together because the focus isn't there, as well as that it might the damage might accelerate because the item is in pieces and those pieces now have edges that are unprotected. So for those reasons, I would go high. If something looked like, if say Sir Walter Scott had some scuff marks and it looked like maybe there was some accretions or something on him that could turn into a stain but looks like it's still on the surface, then that would be, I would argue, medium. So that would be, we need to keep an eye on this and we need to maybe start planning even if we're not actioning any treatment. But low priority would be if he's looking fine as he is now and there's nothing immediate that needs to happen. It just might be nice to, say, give him a cleanup at some point or a dusting if he was to go on display, but nothing that's needing to be actioned straight away. So once you've gone through these, I will put, we've got an approved one and it's high priority. The treatment proposal, a lot of the time this information will be provided to you by the proposal with the expert. But it's good to get a bit of practice, and feel free to, give this a go as a treatment proposal where you're just trying to only have that valuable information without additional condition details. So it's very easy for these proposals to spiral into when it comes to the focus. So starting to actually describe the problem when all you need is the straightforward, this is the justification, this is what's proposed to happen. So these are the steps we would like to take, this is why, and just keeping it contained. So the treatment date, pretty straightforward. The date that this treatment has happened. So whether it is when it's proposed, whether it is when an assessment has occurred from an expert materials conservator, or when something has actually been treated or repaired. The process, once again, this should come from the project itself. So these details, in an ideal world, the process will also be laid out and documented. So for these, if there is an official treatment proposal, process, and outcome report, that's where I would be noting for further information, see this location. So making sure you're also giving that nod to the next person about where they can find more information. But at the same time, I would still be putting in the details about the outcomes and once again, keeping it contained. So making sure that it is, the outcome matches what was proposed. So this is what was proposed. And of course, that will have the, proposed to improve it, improve an item in some way. This should be explaining that improvement, but just really keeping it to the bones of the thing. Treated by, once again, this information should be there if you have engaged someone to work on your collection. So putting in what you have and seeking out, so making sure you do have at least a contact, so either an email or a phone number is always in your interest. But that's what it looks like. But once again, these haven't, it isn't a collection that I've assigned as records that have had conservation treatments. So it might just be good to sort of feel free to have a click around and have a look and have a bit of a think. And I would encourage you to read these areas in the Victorian Collections catalogue. But the exhibition will be the key one that you'll be adding in here. And the reason for that is really, I'm anticipating that it might be, good practice to have a little bit more of a go in the context and the research side, now specific to the social history collection. So that is it in a nutshell. And I know that was quite quick, so feel free to ask questions. But does anyone at this point have any questions to do with those fields or outside of those fields, just in general? Is that someone there? Sorry.
Yes.
I
did have a quick
Oh no.
question. Cataloging, the pages. So there was
I'll bring this over.
two different candidates.
I'm so sorry, my internet's not great. What was that?
One of the photographs that I have has two separate cataloging detail pages. So there's two different condition reports. So would you go with the one that was most up to date as opposed to the other one?
I would actually add both of them.
Okay.
So because you can add different so because you can add more than one, I would put one in and then I would put the other one in. So I would make sure you're adding any of that information. And can I ask, are there dates on both of them or are they undated?
No, there's definitely two sets of dates and there are two signatures, but one of them is really hard.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. So the fact that they have dates is
hard to read.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's sorry, it's jumping all around when it comes to the reception. But I will. Oh, I think you can see that my connection is unstable. Are there any other questions at this point? No? Okay, excellent. So in that case, I will show you this week's Trello cover image competition. So it's been very cold in Beechworth and it's been very gloomy. And so I've been thinking about holidays and leaving and going somewhere really nice. So I thought this week could be an ideal holiday destination. I have picked a picture of Thara River, so Ngarigo Monaro country. It's in Croajingolong National Park, so it's the easternmost point of Victoria. It's where I spent a significant amount of my childhood, and it would always be my pick for a holiday destination, no matter how many times I go there. But this is a photograph of the Thara River as it breaks into the ocean. So every time I've been there, which, is a significant amount, every couple of weeks, the river builds up and builds up and up and up and gets really deep, and then it breaks into the ocean. And at that point, everyone grabs boogie board or whatever they have around, jumps in the water, and then hopefully someone remembers that they need to be caught, and one person stands and catches everyone as they go flying in from the river into the sea, unless they're caught. But it's where a lot of my fondest memories are from. And yeah, I think it's a beautiful place that I'm not sure if it's accessible at the moment. It was impacted quite significantly in the fires that we had in 2019 and 2020. But I know that there's incredible work going on there to bring the environment back to a happier place. And with that, I think there'll be more access in the future. But I'm not sure that there's much access at the moment because it's accessible via a bridge, and that bridge was destroyed. But it is a wonderful place that I would recommend. So please have a think and pick your own so I can dream through you about where I could go instead of being freezing. But I will also get up. Ooh, while we're here. Oh no. Sorry, I'll just jump into. Oh. I have to jump into Trello, and I did the very smart thing of exiting it just before I was ready. But I wanted to say thank you for your image contributions for last week. But I think I'm doing something. Oh dear. I wanted to show everyone's photos because they are wonderful. I will say, who was that? Was that Athena? There's someone that made me cry this morning. But I love Doctor Who. And saw the photo. Who was it that posted the Doctor Who one?
Yeah, that was me.
That came in this morning.
So it's a real throwback, that one.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I know as soon as I saw it, I don't want to go. I don't want you to go. But I cannot. I'll see if I can. Nope. Okay, I'm gonna have to show. So I wanted to show everyone's because it's a lot of fun, but instead I think I'll have to just show the winner, which was a very early contender, I will say, and I wasn't sure how people would go, but I might actually. Jazz, your photo was fantastic, and it's something that I've been laughing at for many years, and just pops into my head so often. But my internet is terrible. How is yours? And would you like to tell everyone about your photograph? Because I'm so sorry, but I can't get my browser to work. Oh no.
Share.
Thank
Can
you.
you see my screen? Yeah.
Yes.
So
Oh, fantastic.
it was describing how, I think it was how dogs attacked him or attacked his wife, and he does describes this, does that, and everybody finds it quite hilarious. And it's just a well-known Australian moment on TV that I find hilarious.
It really is. And I think something that's so good is that the more you watch it, the funnier it gets, which I know there's many
Yeah.
things like that, but it really, once you start, you just can't stop. But I thought it's a very iconic memory. And I wonder what the reporter that was there that day thinks about it
And you
now.
can see his wife.
Oh, sorry, it's lagging at the wrong times.
No, no, that's okay. I was just saying how you could see his wife's face.
Yeah, it's almost like she's re-experiencing the dog attack. Um,
Yeah.
But I do, want to say thank you so much for the contributions. They're so interesting, and you all take it in different directions, which is, is really enjoyable. But that one I just find just so iconic, for so many reasons. But I feel like he did the perfect job of describing what a dog attack was like. So I hope he's happy with it. But I might, if there's, are there any more questions? Because I might leave it there for this week. And please let me know as you keep going through these records if there's any questions, and I'll have another look. Billy Joe, I know there's a couple of messages that I need to respond to specific to your pictures, and looking at those dates and those sort of what happens when there's a lot of research, but not necessarily a perfect answer at the end when it comes to provenance. So I have seen them, and I will continue to communicate with you. But other than that, everyone have a wonderful week, and I hope it's enjoyable. I hope you get something out of working on these items, and I'll see you next week. So, see ya.